The desert moves as if it were breathing. Each gust carries the dust of centuries, and each grain of sand once brushed the walls of temples long vanished. Somewhere beyond the dunes of Dakhla, far from the Nile's living waters, lies a hollow in the earth that does not appear on any satellite image. The Bedouins who cross this region avoid it, claiming that compasses twist there, that voices echo where no walls stand. Yet fragments of pottery from the late 18th dynasty, the era of Akhenaten, have been found scattered nearby, hinting that the place was once known. At the edge of dusk, a wanderer follows a fragment of obsidian carved with faint spirals, a relic unearthed by explorers in the early 1900s near Amarna. The spiral matches the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, found in the Book of the Netherworld, where it marks the cycle of death and rebirth. Egyptologists believe it represented the eternal return of Ra, the sun god, who dies each night and is born again with dawn. The wanderer walks westward, toward the realm the ancients called the Land of Silence, where the setting sun was thought to descend into the underworld. The air changes. Wind no longer sings. The lantern's light stretches thin, its flame bowing in reverence. Beneath his boots, the sand gives way to stone, a slab of black basalt, cool and marked by the faint outline of a serpent. He kneels. Dust gathers on his palms, fine as flour, ancient as breath. With slow care, he clears the surface until the shape is complete. Not a carving, but a lid. Beneath it, the hollow hums like the memory of thunder. Archaeological records speak of hidden tombs sealed with sacred silence, not to honor, but to contain. The priests of Ammonius were known to erase names, striking them from walls and scrolls so their souls could not live in eternity. Somewhere between the reigns of Horemheb and Ramses I, history bends and breaks. A void of 15 unaccounted years. It was during this gap, perhaps, that a ruler without name was buried beneath the sands, his identity forbidden, his monuments destroyed. The traveler lowers a rope and descends through the narrow shaft. The air grows heavy, scented faintly of cedar and myrrh, resins once used to anoint the dead. Walls shimmer with obsidian dust. His lantern's glow catches faint engravings, not hieroglyphs, but star symbols similar to those seen in the tomb of Seti I, constellations arranged not for navigation, but prayer. Each mark seems to pulse with invisible rhythm, as if still remembering the chants once sung here. Deeper still, the corridor widens into a chamber shaped like a lotus. At its heart rests a sarcophagus made of translucent quartz, veined with gold dust. The lid bears a single word, unreadable, erased. The traveler kneels beside it. The silence is vast, presses against the skin, a silence that feels aware. Around him, fragments of painted plaster cling to the walls. A solar bark, a winged sun, and a strange image of two figures merging into one, man and light intertwined. Some researchers have speculated that a heretical sect within the Aten cult believed enlightenment could be achieved through death, not as an end, but as absorption into divine radiance. Such beliefs vanished with the restoration of the old gods, condemned as blasphemy. Yet here, in this chamber, that forgotten faith breathes again, carved into every curve of stone. The traveler lights a stick of incense. Smoke spirals upward, soft and pale, coiling through the darkness like a memory rising. The scent awakens something, or perhaps only echoes awaken themselves. A faint vibration runs through the air, not sound, but resonance. A low hum, ancient as breath. It seems to come from the sarcophagus itself. For a moment, the quartz glows faintly, as if remembering light. Then it fades. He exhales. Dust dances in the lamplight. Perhaps it is only air shifting through sealed passages, or perhaps the earth is whispering. Some tombs were not built for death, but for containment, prisons for knowledge that once burned too brightly. The priests who sealed them often joined the buried, believing their silence kept the balance of the world intact. When the traveler finally ascends, dawn has not yet come. The desert above is motionless, silver under the moon. The slab closes behind him with no sound. The sand will cover it again before morning. He stands alone beneath a sky scattered with cold stars, knowing that somewhere below, light still sleeps. When scientists examined it under ultraviolet light in 1963, they recorded a spectral pattern resembling written lines, but no ink was found. Only vibration, a residue of energy captured in the fibers, as though the papyrus still remembered being read. Some say the scroll contained instructions for awakening inner sight, a hymn to the eye of Ra hidden in the heart of man. Others believe it was a warning, a message written in light to remind mortals of their own transience. Whatever truth it held, it was a truth that could not coexist with form. Once understood, it vanished, not destroyed but absorbed. Perhaps all sacred knowledge behaves this way. It burns itself away when grasped, leaving only warmth behind. And somewhere beneath Saqqara's dust, perhaps another chamber waits. Another scroll sealed in silence, dreaming of the day it will be read once more and burn again without fire. The desert keeps its secrets in layers. Each century lays down a new breath of dust, and beneath it, another story waits. Somewhere west of Abydos, where the horizon bends into eternity, lies a place the locals call Medinet El Samt, the city of silence. Nothing remains above ground but a scatter of stones half buried in sand. Yet beneath, the earth hums with memory. The first discovery came in 1934, when a team led by the British archaeologist Margaret Benson recorded a faint hollow echo while setting stakes near the ruins of an old necropolis. When they cleared the sand, they uncovered a paved floor, limestone blocks inscribed with markings too eroded to read. Beneath it, another floor older still, then another. By the time they reached the seventh layer, their lamps burned low and the air had grown heavy, thick with mineral breath. Each stratum revealed a different city, each built directly upon the bones of the last 7 epochs, resting one atop another like pages in a sacred book. The uppermost bore traces of the late period, perhaps 26th dynasty. Graceful columns, small shrines to Batet and Ta. The layer below belonged to the Middle Kingdom, walls of mud brick, faint remains of frescoes depicting harvest and offering. Below that, a limestone causeway, its stones smoother than any tool could shape. Beneath it, copper blades fused to obsidian, fragments of pottery bearing geometric spirals, signs of a culture older than written Egypt. The traveler descends through this history, his lantern flickering against centuries of sleep. Each level grows darker, quieter, until the air no longer feels like air at all but like the breath of time itself. The sand beneath his boots softens. He brushes a wall and dust falls away like silk. There are carvings beneath, lines that are neither hieroglyphs nor art, but something in between, symbols of motion, perhaps waves or echoes, as though someone long ago tried to write the sound of time. When he speaks, his voice lingers. The echo does not return from stone but from deep below, as if the city itself replies. Perhaps the tomb was never meant to be found. Archaeological journals later described this phenomenon, subterranean resonance. They called it. Certain strata of compacted sandstone could reflect sound at different frequencies. But the locals told another story. They said the lower chambers were alive, that each civilization built upon the last not from ignorance but reverence, to honor what lay below, not to erase it. At the 5th layer, he finds a circular hall cut from black granite. The stones are seamless, their surface smooth as glass. In the center lies a ring of seated figures, carved life-size, their faces eroded yet serene. Before each statue, a small bowl carved from alabaster, still half filled with dust that gleams faintly in the lamplight. On the wall behind them, a single line of inscription runs unbroken. We did not build to last. We built to be remembered. The deeper he goes, the colder the air becomes, until his breath appears like mist. At the 6th layer, he finds no buildings at all, only corridors of natural rock, veins of quartz that glow under the flame. Here, ancient miners once sought the white stone of eternity, a crystalline mineral prized for temple inlays. But among the quartz veins lie remnants of architecture. Steps cut into walls that lead nowhere, arches framing only darkness. Finally, at the 7th layer, he reaches a chamber shaped like an eye. Its ceiling is domed, its floor smooth as water, and at its center stands a single monolith of red granite, unmarked, unmoving. The air vibrates faintly around it, as though a distant chant still lingers. The traveler kneels and presses his palm to the stone. It is warm. In that silence, he feels the weight of every century above him. 7 civilizations breathing through his fingertips. He imagines each one hearing the faint hum beneath their feet, wondering what lay below, building anew to honor the mystery rather than disturb it. When he returns to the surface, the night sky feels impossibly wide. The wind carries the scent of dust and salt, and for a moment, the dunes resemble waves, the desert mirroring the ocean that once covered it. Today, the site of Medinet El Samt is closed, buried again under protective sand. Only fragments of pottery and an inscription slab remain in the Luxor Museum. Yet, every so often, during quiet evenings, archaeologists standing above the dunes report a faint vibration underfoot, rhythmic, steady, like breath. Perhaps the city was never abandoned. Perhaps it still hums below, each era still speaking softly to the next. 7 layers deep, 7 dreams beneath time. In the temple ruins of Abydos, where the air still carries the scent of myrrh and dust, there once stood a chamber no larger than a tomb, built for reflection rather than prayer. Archaeologists call it the Hall of Radiance, though no records name its builder. What they found inside, half buried beneath centuries of sand and silence, was a disk of polished obsidian, smooth as still water, dark as night. The surface did not reflect light. It seemed to absorb it. Perhaps it still dreams beneath the breath of sand. In 1908, during the excavations led by Edouard Neville, a fragment of this disk was unearthed. It was recorded as Artifact 71B, polished black stone, composition unknown. It measured only the width of a human hand, yet when held to the sun, it swallowed the light completely, leaving the air around it cool. Workers refused to carry it after dusk, saying it showed faces that were not their own. The full mirror has never been found, but the legends that survived in Coptic manuscripts describe it as the Eye of Silence, a relic from before dynasties, forged in the age when gods looked upon themselves. The priests of Abydos believed that mirrors were not for vanity, but remembrance. To see one's image was to touch the divine memory that shaped all form. The traveler stands at dusk inside what remains of that chamber. The limestone walls are cracked, the ceiling open to the evening sky. The floor still bears the faint impression of where the mirror once rested, a circle etched into the stone, lined with traces of gold leaf. When the sun dips low, light filters through the gaps in the wall, striking the circle with a soft red glow. He kneels there and opens his journal, noting each fragment. Fragments of obsidian, fragments of quartz, a shallow groove that channels the light toward the circle's heart. The geometry is deliberate, sacred. He senses that this room was not built for worship, but for return. In ancient Egyptian belief, mirrors were symbols of Hathor, goddess of joy, love, and the morning sky. Yet here, the iconography is older, darker. On one broken stele nearby, he finds an engraving of a god without face, a human form holding a round mirror where the head should be. Beneath it, a single line of inscription reads, "We became what we beheld." He lights a lantern, and for a moment, the flame's reflection dances on the stone circle. The air changes. The wind dies. The silence feels dense, almost listening. In that quiet, the traveler glimpses something impossible. Not an image, but a movement. The reflection deepens, and in it he sees neither his own face nor the ruins, but what feels like memory itself. Vast temples unbroken, processions under full moons, gods moving through corridors of incense and shadow. It lasts only a breath. Then the light flickers, and the stone grows dull again. He steps back, heart calm, not afraid, only aware that he has witnessed something older than words. Later, in his notes, he writes, "The mirror is not glass. It is absence made visible." Modern researchers have suggested that the obsidian contained trace elements of hematite, which could create optical illusions under firelight. Others believe it was ceremonial, an oracular object used to induce trances among priests. But none can explain the temperature shift recorded in the chamber. how the air remains several degrees cooler within the circle, even after sunset. The Nile has always been called the heart of Egypt, the eternal artery pulsing through sand and stone. Yet there was once another river, whispered of in papyri that few have ever seen, said to flow in defiance of the sun itself. It did not move toward the sea, but toward the desert, a current that returned upon itself, winding back through forgotten valleys like memory seeking its source. Some locals still visit the site. They place offerings of oil and honey at the threshold and whisper their names into the dust, saying the mirror remembers voices. They say that on the longest night of the year, when the moon turns white over Abydos, a faint glow reappears on the temple floor, a shimmer like still water, waiting to reflect once more. Perhaps the mirror never left. Perhaps it still lies beneath the sand, patient, gathering the light of forgotten stars, dreaming of the gods who once gazed upon themselves and vanished into silence. At the edge of the Nubian desert, where the Nile curls like a dark ribbon between cliffs of gold, there stands a temple that was built to wait. Its stones were not carved for prayer, nor for power, but for a single act of patience, the arrival of light. Abu Simbel, the name drifts like sand through time, carved into the rock nearly 3,000 years ago by the hand of Ramesses II. It faces the rising sun with the stillness of prophecy. Twice each year, the first light of dawn enters its heart, traveling through a long corridor lined with gods, until it touches the inner sanctuary and wakes the stone kings from their long dream. The traveler arrives in silence. It is the hour before sunrise, when the desert holds its breath. The facade glows faintly under the last stars. For seated figures, immense and calm, their faces turned toward the east. Their eyes, unblinking, have watched 30 centuries of mornings. Inside, the passage is narrow, the air cool. The walls shimmer with reliefs of battles and offerings. Yet even these seem hushed, as if aware that the true ceremony is not carved but timed. At the far end waits the Holy of Holies. 4 statues seated in darkness, Ammonius-Ra, Horicti, Ramesses II himself, and Ta, the god of night. He lights no lamp. The only illumination must come from the sun. Outside, a faint blush touches the horizon. The first beam slips through the entrance, slides across the floor, and begins its slow journey inward. The light moves like a thought, deliberate, sacred, soundless. It passes the outer hall, touches the carved pillars, glides over the hieroglyphs of eternal kingship. The air grows warmer, dust sparkles. Then, after moments that feel like centuries, the beam reaches the inner sanctuary. It rests upon the faces of Ammonius-Ra and Horicti, then upon the king himself. Ta alone remains in shadow, the god who must never see the sun. Its name has been lost, but in the writings of a Greek traveler, possibly Hecataeus of Abdera, who walked these lands in the 4th century BCE, there is mention of the River of Mirrors, whose waters remembered what had already been. Some Egyptologists believe he was referring to a seasonal tributary of the Nile near the Fayum Depression, known in local dialects as Bar al-Zaman, the Sea of Time. Others think it was only metaphor, but the legends carried by the desert say otherwise. The traveler watches, breath still. The chamber glows not with brightness, but with awareness, as if the temple remembers why it was built. The statues seem to inhale the dawn, and for a heartbeat, light and stone become one. In that instant, the temple fulfills its purpose, the alignment conceived by architects who understood both heaven and earth. The phenomenon is exact. February 22nd and October 22nd, marking the king's coronation and birth, when the sun's angle pierces the chamber for just a few minutes before withdrawing again for half a year of waiting. Archaeologists have measured the geometry countless times. The corridor's axis, carved with celestial precision, tilts 92 degrees northeast. The distance from entrance to sanctuary, 65 meters, calculated to guide the first beam precisely to the divine faces. Even after the entire mountain was moved in 1968 to save it from the flood of the Aswan High Dam, the alignment survived, a testament to design born from devotion. Yet standing there, the traveler feels none of the mathematics, only heartbeat and silence. He realizes that this is not a monument to a king, but to the rhythm of the world itself, to the conversation between sun and stone, day and night, life and stillness. As the light withdraws, the faces fade back into dusk. The moment ends. But the temple does not mourn the passing. It waits. That waiting is its worship. Outside, the desert awakens. The wind carries the scent of sand warmed by new fire. The traveler turns once more to the facade, four faces returning to shadow, and understands what the ancients meant when they said eternity is not endless time, but perfect repetition. Somewhere, beyond centuries, the architects of Abu Simbel still measure the sun. Somewhere, the dawn still enters the stone. And even when no one watches, the temple keeps its promise. To wait for the light and to remember. In the desert west of Luxor, where the cliffs of Thebes crumble into dust and light, there stands a monastery carved into the stone. Deir el-Medina's forgotten brother, a smaller sanctuary built for those who chose to stay behind when the pharaohs were gone. Its walls hold no gold, no relics of power, only silence. At the edge of twilight, a lone scholar travels along a dry wadi west of Abydos, where ancient tombs rise like islands of stone. He carries a clay tablet found near the temple of Seti I, covered in faint symbols, not hieroglyphs, but rippling lines resembling waves. When pressed with pigment and rolled, the pattern reveals a spiral, a river returning to itself. He follows this trail, guided by stories of an underground current said to flow beneath the sands, older than the Nile, perhaps even older than the gods. It is said that the last of its scribes, a Coptic monk named Michael, lived there in the 9th century, long after the temples had turned to dust, long after the language of the gods had fallen silent. He wrote not for kings, nor for scholars, but for the memory of the wind. His manuscripts, fragments of psalms, lost gospels, and hymns to both Christ and Ra, were found centuries later beneath the cracked floor of his cell, preserved by the dry breath of the desert. The traveler stands before that cell. The doorway is barely wide enough to enter. Inside, the walls are covered with thin scratches of Coptic, Greek, and faded hieratic, words overlapping like prayers whispered across time. A wooden table remains, its surface carved by the strokes of a reed pen. Upon it, the faint ring of an ink bowl, long evaporated, still shines in the lamplight. He sits where Michael once sat. The wind sighs through the narrow window, carrying the scent of stone and centuries. On the far wall, an inscription runs in a trembling hand. He who writes in silence hears eternity. Archaeologists discovered the monastery in 1948. It lies near the Valley of the Queens, its entrance hidden behind a slope of limestone. Excavations revealed scrolls written on papyrus and palm leaves, bound together with linen thread. The text spoke of light and stillness, fragments that blurred the line between prayer and memory. One fragment reads, "When the voices of men ceased, the stones began to sing. I only wrote what I heard." The traveler traces the letters with his finger. The ink has long faded, but the indentations remain. They feel like heartbeat marks, soft, uneven, human. He imagines Michael writing by lamplight, alone among ghosts, listening to the desert for words. Each night he dipped his pen not into ink, but into silence, shaping language out of breath. Outside, the horizon glows pale. The sun has not yet risen. The walls catch a faint shimmer, as if remembering color. He realizes this monastery was not built for worship, but for witness. Its geometry, square, narrow, patient, directs the eye not upward, but inward. Later, in the archives of Luxor, historians would note that the texts contained linguistic bridges, phrases blending Egyptian solar hymns with Christian psalms, invoking both Ra and the word. Michael, they wrote, was a monk of two worlds, a keeper of transition, the last breath of one faith turning into the first sigh of another. The traveler understands this now. The monk was not translating scripture, he was translating silence. Each word he wrote was an echo of something the earth had forgotten how to say. He finds, behind a loose stone in the corner, a narrow shelf carved into the wall. Inside it lies a single reed pen, fossilized, fragile as bone. The tip still bears a trace of red pigment, the color once reserved for sacred names. Beneath it, a small clay lamp. He lifts it, and it hums faintly in his hand, as if the last prayer still sleeps within. The air grows cooler. The desert opens into a basin carved smooth by time. At its center lies a fissure, and within it, water, dark, motionless, gleaming under the moon. It reflects the sky perfectly, as if the heavens themselves had fallen and taken root in stone. When he kneels to touch it, the reflection trembles, and the stars ripple like breath upon glass. He lights the wick. The flame bends, steady and golden. In that trembling light, the room feels alive again. The scratches on the walls become lines of meaning. The silence, a scripture of air. He closes his eyes and listens. Somewhere deep beneath the wind, a voice whispers. Not in words, but in rhythm, slow as breathing. He does not try to write it down. Some truths, he realizes, are not meant to be recorded. They live only in the act of listening. When he leaves, dawn has begun to touch the cliffs. The first sunlight spills across the stone, warm and endless. Behind him, the lamp burns until its oil is gone. In the archives, the scrolls remain brittle, incomplete, half-legible. Scholars still argue over their meaning. But perhaps Michael's work was never meant to be understood. Perhaps his writing was not message, but offering, a way of teaching the future how to hear again. And so, even now, when the wind moves across the cliffs of Thebes, it carries faint echoes of that ancient script. Some silences, it seems, become the voice of history. The wind moves through the ruins and remembers. Every temple, every stone, every echo was once a breath, once a name whispered into time. We listen now, not to conquer history, but to rest inside it, to let its silence teach us how to dream again, because the past never ends. He lowers a small brass vessel into the pool, collecting a sample. The water is strangely heavy, faintly luminous. When poured from one jar to another, it seems to resist gravity, spiraling upward before settling. Modern science might call it mineral saturation or density variation, yet the ancients called it sacred resistance, a sign that time here moved differently, that memory thickened the air. It only sleeps, waiting for light, waiting for the listener, waiting for the sound of remembering. Hieroglyphic fragments from Abydos mention a stream of the dead who return, where the souls of pharaohs were said to drift backward through the afterlife before merging again with the dawn. In the funerary texts of the Middle Kingdom, the journey of the deceased follows the sun's nocturnal voyage through the underworld, a descent and return. Perhaps this river was its earthly reflection, a physical mirror of that celestial passage. The scholar camps nearby. Night deepens, and the water begins to stir. He listens, and hears not waves but voices. They speak in a rhythm too slow for understanding, as if each syllable took a century to form. The sound is not frightening. It is vast, patient, ancient. It tells not of prophecy, but of remembrance, of empires rising and returning to dust, of words spoken once and still echoing beneath the surface. In his notes, found decades later near the ruins of Deir el-Medina, he wrote, "The current bends. It does not move forward but inward, as though it remembers its source. The handwriting ends abruptly there." His camp was found untouched, his lantern extinguished beside the water, his journal sealed with a thumbprint of clay. Archaeologists later traced the phenomenon to a rare hydraulic illusion caused by layered aquifers. But the Bedouins still call that place El-Zaman, the mother of time. They say the pool swells during certain lunar alignments, when shadows of forgotten constellations fall upon it. On those nights, reflections appear not of the present sky but of older ones, constellations no longer visible in our era. The listener might imagine standing there, the desert silent, the stars whispering in inverted light, the river breathing backward, each wave a heartbeat of history, each ripple a forgotten name. The sands around shimmer faintly, as though remembering the sea they once were. The scholar's footprints vanish by morning. Only the pool remains, still, luminous, patient. Perhaps it was not water at all, but memory given form. Perhaps time itself returns there to rest, before flowing forward again. There are ruins that rest in the open daylight, and there are others that only breathe when the sun begins to die. In the western hills beyond Luxor, where the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari catch the last fire of the evening, explorers once spoke of a shimmer among the stones, a gate that appeared only at dusk, carved not by hands, but by the slow work of light and shadow. In 1893, the archaeologist Flinders Petrie mentioned a strange formation in his notebooks, a sandstone arch that seemed solid at sunset and absent by dawn. Most dismissed it as a mirage, the trick of the Theban heat. Yet local workers called the place Bab el-Lail, the Gate of Night. They refused to pass it after twilight, saying that it did not lead forward but inward, to where the gods dream of men. The chapter begins at that hour when light grows heavy and gold. The air stands still, the cliffs glow like bronze, and the wind falls silent as if awaiting a prayer. Among the broken pillars and half-buried shrines, the gate flickers into being. A tall oval of faint radiance etched into the rock face, its border lined with half-erased hieroglyphs. When the sunlight fades to amber, the carvings ignite, tracing a curve that looks like the horizon folded upon itself. The symbols are old, older than the New Kingdom, their forms more akin to those found at Abydos, the same sacred site where the earliest kings carved their descent into eternity. One sign repeats again and again, two hands cupping a disk of light. Egyptologists translate it as Simerenpit, the joining of time, a ritual phrase signifying the moment when the day becomes night. The traveler stands before it, notebook trembling in the windless air. He feels a vibration beneath his feet, faint, rhythmic, like a pulse. He places his palm on the rock, and it is warm, though the sun is already gone. A faint hum follows, too deep for hearing, too soft for words. The gate does not open, it deepens. Ancient priests of Ammonius spoke of transitional hours, sacred points when the boundary between realms thins, when the gods walked among their own shadows. The Gate of Dusk, perhaps, was one such threshold, carved where light itself was once worshipped. In old Thebes, the evening rites were called the ceremony of the veil, when temple doors were sealed and the last hymns drifted toward the cliffs. Some believed that the cliffs themselves listened, that each dusk, the gods withdrew through their hidden passages into the underworld. And perhaps one evening those hidden doors took form. The traveler records his measurements, height, curvature, angle of shadow. But when he steps back, the arch seems to have shifted. It no longer stands against the stone, but slightly apart, like a mirage held in breath. Through it, the color of the desert changes. The sand appears silver, and the horizon ripples as if submerged. He thinks he sees movement beyond. Not figures, but light in motion, bending, folding like silk under water. He lowers his eyes. For a moment, his own reflection stands before him, older, distant, watching. The hum grows softer, more human, like a whisper remembered from childhood. Then the glow fades. The cliff returns to stillness. The wind breathes again, carrying only the scent of dust and myrrh. By the time the stars appear, the gate is gone. Only the faint ring of darker stone remains, smooth to the touch, as if brushed by something vast. He sketches it quickly, knowing that by morning even the mark may vanish. Decades later, satellite images of the Theban escarpments revealed unusual heat patterns along that same ridge, residual energy where no sun should linger. The data was archived, unstudied. The site is now closed to tourists, though shepherds still report a pale light flickering among the rocks when the sun sets red. Some mysteries are not found, they wait. The Gate of Night does not open to the living, nor to the dead, but to remembrance itself, to the breath that lies between one day and the next. And so the listener is left beneath that same twilight sky, the sandstone glowing softly, the wind whispering across unseen thresholds. The desert exhales and the light withdraws. Perhaps the gate still stands there, invisible until the heart grows quiet enough to see it. Beneath the limestone cliffs of western Thebes, where the desert folds into shadow, lies a passage few have entered. It begins as a crack in the rock, no wider than a whisper, and deepens into a corridor carved not by tools but by patience. The Bedouins call it Dar al-Samt, the House of Silence. Scholars, when they speak of it at all, name it the Library of Stones. It was first noted in 1889 by Émile Amelino, the French archaeologist who excavated at Abydos. He recorded a rumor of a chamber whose walls hum when touched. His notes end abruptly, as though the echo swallowed the pen itself. But fragments of his journals mention a hidden monastic settlement nearby, a Coptic order that guarded something older than their own faith. The story begins at twilight, when the cliffs blush gold and fade to violet. A single traveler descends the slope, guided by an inscription half buried in sand. The hieroglyph reads simply, Mare Renet, place of the kept word. He lights his lantern, and the flame bends inward, drawn by unseen breath. The air smells of myrrh and stone. The passage opens into a chamber vast and hollow, its ceiling lost in shadow. The walls are lined not with scrolls, but with blocks of limestone, each engraved with faint symbols that shimmer when brushed by light. Some are hieratic, others Greek, and some written in a script unknown. Lines that curve like sound waves, etched to preserve not words, but resonance. Archaeologists would later discover that certain stones, when struck, emit tones of distinct pitch. The ancients knew this. The builders of Dendera, of Saqqara, chose limestone that sang. Here, in this library, the idea was taken further. Each slab hums faintly, tuned to a different note, as if the chamber itself were a choir of silence. He moves deeper. The walls pulse with soft vibration, the echoes of centuries condensed into tone. A broken steel lies on the floor, its surface polished smooth. Carved into its base are the words Midu Menk, the living speech. He touches it, and the air around him ripples. For a moment, the sound of chanting fills the chamber, distant voices speaking in an unknown tongue, slow and rhythmic, as though time itself were praying. The monks of late antiquity once believed that sacred knowledge could live within material, that stone, once blessed, could remember the vibration of a voice. Here, their faith seems to have found proof. Each echo lingers like breath trapped within the mineral. When he whispers, the sound returns altered, softer, older, carrying words he did not say. He writes in his journal, "The walls are breathing, the ink trembles. They remember sound, as if the air had learned to think." In a niche at the far end of the hall rests a single object, a basalt tablet no larger than a hand. Upon it, a spiral of inscriptions descends inward, ending in a single symbol, a circle within a circle. It glows faintly when his lantern dims. He reads the outermost ring. The word does not end, it folds. Scholars later argued that this tablet was of Ptolemaic origin, inscribed by priests who sought to merge Greek philosophy with Egyptian cosmology. Yet its tone, both literal and spiritual, belongs to something older. The spiral recalls pre-dynastic art, the language of beginnings. The traveler lingers there until the oil in his lamp thins to smoke. When he finally steps back, the chamber hums softly, like a heartbeat receding into the deep. He exits through the same narrow passage, leaving behind the warmth of the stones and the soft vibration of unspoken thought. By dawn, the entrance is half covered by sand. He marks the coordinates, but when others return months later, the fissure has sealed. Only the wind remains, and sometimes, when the cliffs catch the evening light, they seem to sing. The library of stones and echoes is never truly found. It is remembered, as sound, as vibration, as the hum that lives beneath silence. Perhaps the ancients knew that words, once spoken, never die. They only wait, trembling in the dark, ready to speak again. The sea is a patient archivist. It remembers everything, not in ink, but in salt. Beneath its silver surface, the world's forgotten cities sleep in a stillness deeper than time. Where the Nile opens its arms to the Mediterranean, between the ruins of Abukir Bay and the waves of Heracleon, divers once found streets of stone lying under green silence. Columns rose like petrified trees, inscriptions shimmered through silt, and the statues of gods looked upward through centuries of water. It was as if the sea itself had been dreaming of cities, of prayers, of vanished suns. The discovery came in 2000, when Frank Gaudio's team uncovered the lost city of Thonis Heracleon, a harbor older than Alexandria, swallowed by the sea nearly 2,000 years ago. Earthquakes, floods, and the slow collapse of sediment had pulled it under. Yet, within that darkness, the stones remained unbroken. Temples of Ammonius Cherub, altars to Isis, ship anchors still tied to nothing, each resting exactly as it had fallen, as though awaiting the light's return. The ocean there is shallow, yet infinite. It moves not like water, but like memory, folding, retreating, revealing fragments of faces carved in granite. Each current brushes away a layer of forgetting, exposing names once carried in the mouths of priests. The diver's lamp glows faintly in the green gloom, tracing hieroglyphs that read per Nefer, the good house, the place of beauty. The city does not appear ruined. It appears paused. Every pillar still stands in half motion, like the dream of a civilization that refused to end. In ancient times, this was the gate between worlds, where pilgrims came to honor the rising sun, where ships brought gold, incense, and the prayers of nations. The Greeks called it the city of Heracles, believing the hero had once landed there after his final labor. But to the Egyptians, it was something quieter, the mirror of heaven upon earth, the horizon made solid in stone. When the waters rose, the people fled inland. Temples sank, statues tilted, and the sea closed like a curtain. For centuries, no one remembered its name. Even Herodotus, who heard whispers of a city swallowed by the Nile, called it only legend. Now, as divers descend, the silence feels alive. Their bubbles rise through centuries of still air, carrying fragments of forgotten breath. A hand brushes the face of a statue. The goddess Isis, her eyes open, her lips unbroken. She seems neither drowned nor asleep, only waiting. Around her feet lie amphorae filled with resin, rings, coins, and offerings left untouched by plunder. The light shifts, rippling gold across stone. Silt floats like dust in a cathedral, and for a moment, the sea seems to speak. Not in sound, but in rhythm. Waves pulse against the ruins like a slow heartbeat, as though the city itself were remembering how to breathe. In the diver's camera, the walls appear luminous, their reliefs softened by centuries of current. One depicts the festival of the sun bark, priests lifting torches as the god sails through night toward dawn. The image repeats across the chambers, endless, circular, a hymn carved for eternity. And perhaps the ocean heard it. Perhaps that hymn never ended, but simply deepened, continuing its chant in water instead of air. When Gaudio surfaced, he wrote, "It feels as though the sea has protected this city, not destroyed it. There are other drowned cities, Pavlopetri in Greece, Yonaguni off Japan, the sunken remains of Baiae beneath the Italian coast. But Heracleon breathes differently. It is not a ruin but a memory made visible, suspended between motion and rest. At dusk, when the divers leave, the light fades to blue. The sea closes again, patient, secret, whole. The sand drifts back, the currents fold, and beneath, the city resumes its slow dreaming. It does not end. It only remembers. Like all things the ocean loves, it waits, breathing, silent, eternal. There are mountains in Egypt that do not rise like peaks but breathe like monuments. Vast, silver-backed silhouettes that glow softly under the full moon. Near the edge of the eastern desert, beyond the sandstone quarries of Hatnub, lies one such mountain. It has no official name, only the one whispered by the Bedouin who pass beneath its shadow, Jabal al-Qamar, the Mountain of the Moon. In 1927, a small team led by the archaeologist Ahmed Kamal found fragments of alabaster stairways along its lower slopes. The discovery never reached the journals. The desert reclaimed it in silence. But Kamal's notes mention something extraordinary: a city without sun, carvings so pale they could only be read by moonlight. And so, the story begins on a night of silver breath and stone. The traveler approaches at dusk. The heat has left the sand, and the air hums with a stillness that feels alive. The mountain glows faintly, not from the moon above, but from the stone itself. A soft luminescence, as if the rock remembers light. He climbs slowly, lantern in hand, though he scarcely needs it. The path winds upward, carved by hands that once shaped kingdoms from silence. Halfway up, he finds the first chamber, an archway flanked by statues whose faces are half erased by centuries of dust. Each bears the same symbol across the chest, a crescent cradling a flame. The inscription beneath reads per Qa, House of Knight's Crown. Archaeologists later traced this symbol to a short-lived cult during the late Middle Kingdom, a brotherhood devoted not to Ra, but to the reflected light of his absence. Inside, the walls shimmer with carvings of cities, towers, canals, bridges, all lit by moons instead of suns. The engravings are cut with impossible precision, each building aligned to constellations no longer visible in the modern sky. The traveler realizes this was not simply art, but remembrance, a map of a kingdom that lived by the rhythm of night. He traces the walls. The scenes shift subtly in the lantern glow. There are markets under silver lamps, gardens where alabaster flowers bloom, and figures who appear to sleep while standing. Above them, a line of hieroglyphs runs like a hymn. When the sun closed its eyes, the faithful began to see. At the heart of the chamber lies a circular platform, carved from a single block of alabaster. Its surface bears faint concentric rings, like ripples frozen in stone. In the center stands a throne, faceless, untouched by decay. Upon its armrests, two inscriptions mirror each other. He who rules in silence and she who carries the mirror of dawn. The duality puzzles him. Was this a dynasty of two, or one who ruled both realms, day and night, through reflection? The moon rises higher. Its light floods through a narrow slit in the ceiling, striking the throne. For a moment, the room breathes. Dust lifts as if weightless. The carvings glow, and the ripples on the platform begin to shimmer like water. The traveler kneels, notebook forgotten. He feels the air thicken, as though the mountain itself were listening. And then, faintly, he hears it. A tone long and low, like wind moving through stone pipes. The sound seems to hum in his chest rather than his ears. It vibrates softly until the entire chamber resonates, alive with quiet music. He remembers reading about this, the acoustic chambers of Dendera, designed to amplify prayers through geometry. But this is different. The sound carries emotion, reverence, longing, memory. It feels not man-made but mountain-made. In his last entry before dawn, he writes, "The light is not reflected. It is remembered. When he returns weeks later with others, the passage cannot be found. The cliff face appears unbroken. The moonlight falls elsewhere. Only fragments of pale stone remain at the base, smooth, cold, faintly luminous in the dark. Modern surveys have detected high traces of calcite and gypsum there, minerals known to glow under lunar reflection. Yet no inscription, no chamber, no throne has been seen again. The locals say the kingdom still rises every full moon, not in body, but in light. That the mountain opens its veins to memory, and for a few hours each month, the stones remember their shape. Perhaps the kingdom was never lost, only folded into moonlight, waiting for eyes gentle enough to see it. In the archives of Cairo's old museum, there exists a single fragment labeled only as Papyrus 441b. Its edges are blackened, yet there is no trace of ash, no scent of smoke. The fibers are intact, as if the scroll had been touched by heat that was not heat, light that remembered how to destroy without flame. It was found in 1902 by a young Egyptian scribe named Youssef Nasri, working near Saqqara, among the debris of a collapsed burial shaft. He described it as warm to the touch, even though it had lain buried for more than 3,000 years. The hieroglyphs shimmered faintly when exposed to air, glowing and then vanishing like breath on glass. Scholars called it a reaction of salts and minerals. Nasri called it divine. The fragment, though incomplete, told of a text known as the Book of Returning Light, a record written not in ink but in radiance. The priests of Thoth were said to guard such writings, created through ritual chants that carved meaning directly into matter. The scroll was never meant to be read by eyes alone. It was to be felt, recited, and heard. The story begins deep beneath the necropolis, in a chamber built of basalt so polished that it reflects every flicker of flame like still water. The traveler enters with a single lamp. His footsteps echo against the black floor, rhythmic, measured, reverent. In the corner lies an altar no higher than his knees, upon which rests a roll of papyrus sealed in resin. He breaks the seal carefully. The moment the air touches it, the script begins to pulse. Letters appear and disappear, lines shifting as though breathing. He realizes the scroll is alive, not in body, but in memory. Each hieroglyph corresponds to a sound, but when spoken aloud, the syllables seem to feed the light instead of fading it. The words do not lose strength when spoken, they gain it. It is as though the sound itself rekindles their meaning, reigniting what the centuries had dimmed. He reads the first passage softly. The flame that does not burn is the memory of the first dawn. The air warms, shadows retreat. For a moment, he feels the presence of something immense, not watching but listening. Later translations compared this passage to a text found at Hermopolis, where the cult of Thoth once described the fiery word, divine speech that creates through sound alone. The traveler continues, though his voice trembles. Each phrase he speaks causes another line to vanish from the page, until the scroll grows pale as linen. The chamber brightens with every word, and when he reaches the end, there is nothing left to read. The scroll glows once, then fades into silence. When he emerges, dawn is breaking over the desert. He holds only the resin tube empty, weightless. The papyrus is gone. Yet when he looks at his hands, a faint glow remains on his fingertips. It lingers through the day, fading only when night falls again. Historians have debated this account for a century. Some call it apocryphal. Others note that the pigments used in late 18th dynasty scripts could create mild luminescence under certain conditions. But none can explain why the surviving fragment, Papyrus 441b, still glows faintly when moonlight touches it.